Hey everybody, I'm a little foggy this morning, but
if you want to be a pretty good parent, you do what it takes.
you got to work through the fog sometimes.
Yeah, life doesn't stop just because you got fog.
Yeah.
Kids don't stop
Yeah.
because you're foggy. We all know that.
So welcome to the fogginess. Welcome to the pretty good parent.
Yeah. In fact, a lot of parenting is foggy because my parent had a lot of fogginess, right?
Yeah.
In early years,
Yeah.
later years.
Some people call it blank tape.
Oh, yeah, a lot of names for
Rolling a lot of stuff. Yeah. But what are we talking about today, Josh?
the topic is screen time and managing screen time, but really our angle is going to be what's the impact on the relationship and the kid and what's the best way to deliver and talk about it versus just the science. We are going to have some statistics and some reference because it's good to know, but most people are struggling and failing at how to implement it, talk about it, and model it, not just what does the science say. So
Yeah.
that's what we're going to try to uncover.
Well, that's awesome. Well, and we talked last episode about what do we want for our kids?
Yeah.
How do we want to parent? And I feel like this ties into the screen time thing. So, because I got some rough stats for you. I'm a little, I think are kind of mind blown.
Fun.
Put the readers on, tell you about
Yeah.
this. And when I think about what I want to be as a parent or what I want for my kids, it was kind of shocking myself on these stats. So this is from slicktext.com. If you Googled it, just they have some stats. I'm sure there's lots of sources out there, but they say that the average recommendation for screen time for kids 6 to 17 years old is 2 hours a day, and then for older 18 and older and adults about 2 to 4 hours a day. All right, I don't know who they are that you're recommending, and that's the standard recommendation. So then they say what the actual is. Do you want to take a stab at what the actual screen time is for 8 to 18-year-old kids?
At least 5 hours. I'd probably say like 5 to 8 hours.
Yeah, you're on the under. It's 7.5 hours a day. And so they say that equals 114 days of the year. That's serious, right? Ooh. Now I kind of want to know how much I'm on screens as well. And then they break that down even more, right? So you have the 8 to 10-year-old group, 6 hours a day. Then the 11 to 14-year-old group, that's the big one, that's 9 hours a day, which is asinine to me.
Oh my gosh.
That's crazy. 9 hours. And they say this is all
screen.
all entertainment purposes. This isn't like necessarily behind school and homework, right? This is watching movies. It's part of TV, physical, part possible. Yeah. And then the 15 to 18 is 7.5 hours a day. But so, yeah, I was just kind of blown away by that. So,
Yeah.
so there you go. Is that,
It's a great,
those numbers?
it's a great diving board to jump off of. That's the reality that we're in. And the truth is, like you said, most adults are on their screen or a screen a lot.
Yeah.
Right. And most of us could say it's not always like the productive screen time. It's zone out, it's be entertained, it's be lost, could be really fun. But what I typically work with parents on, because, parents always ask, and a lot of times there's conflict over privileges of screen time and all the threats and dangers and all that. I think it's always important to start with what are the red flag signs for your kid that it's too much. Just watching it, I'm very much a nature-oriented person in terms of like how to have the best mind, but I feel like I also live a pretty normal American life, which is like my phone's always with me or often with me.
Right.
I'm looking at like news and sports and text messages. I'm not big on social media, but I totally get the attraction. But the red flags are irritation, like emotional exhaustion. Both of our children show signs of irritability when they're tired or they spend too much time on the screen and they're less empathetic. They're not even doing social media stuff. Like our son's just gaming, but he'll be not as nice, certainly less patient, And those are all the red flag signs that he's like overdid it. Other than that, like I usually ask parents, like, what's it getting in the way of? Is it like physical health, emotional health, relational health, academics, and prioritizing what needs to get done versus making a battle out of the screen time, right? Inevitably, you might have to say, sorry, you have to be done, or these are your limits. But if you really, we go back to like our last podcast of what do you want for your kids? Like, well, I want them to take responsibility, I want them to have balance. Obviously, kids don't have that emotional maturity at all stages to know like when they're out of balance. And so as a parent, it's really important that we step in and say, hey, I know you're loving your thing that you're doing right now. How much time do you have left? I would really love for you to get outside, work on this project, do this thing with me, read a book, even listen to a podcast is a different element of engagement. It's not as obviously as ideal as like go play outside, but identifying what are the pain points for your kid, what starts to happen, and then start to help them connect those dots. Like, what does that feel like when you seem unregulated, you seem really irritable? That often happens when you spend too much time. If they're escalated, they're also going to have a hard time being like, I feel like I'm irritable, Dad.
Yeah.
They just are irritable and rude, right? I've seen a lot of parents like get their kids in trouble. The kids do it, the kids say it, but then they get consequences on top of it because they're emotionally escalated. It's not the time to talk about should or shouldn't. It's like, really, let's try to de-escalate. And right now, you being on the screen needs to take a break. Like, let's take a quick walk. Let's stretch. Let's listen to just some music. Let's do something to just reset. And then teaching them the connection between their own body and what's influencing it. And again, age progressive, right? So the younger they are, the less insightful and introspective they're going to be. But to start to connect like, oh, you seem tense. That often happens when you spend a lot of time watching something. They might not agree, but you want to try to like help them be self-aware of what it feels like it feels for us. Like if I've spent too much time scrolling through something,
Right.
I would say I feel gross, even if what I'm looking at is not gross, right? It's not like some crazy debate or...
Well, it's just such a huge time suck, right? And you're like,
Yeah, I did. And my mind and my whole existence has like shrunk down to like calculating someone else's thoughts often.
right.
You know, it feels gross to me compared to I'm breathing, I'm enjoying people or space and have some projects or just like enjoying my time.
Yeah.
No, I'm like being fed someone's message.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I don't like that. Oh, I do like that.
Quick plug, be sure to check out our social media feed.
Yeah. Well, we love to manipulate your mind and guilt you into better parenting.
Yeah.
You're missing out.
Okay, so I would love to take a like step back. You know how I like to just redirect this towards me, kind of what I'm all about, and yeah, and all of my struggles, Josh. But no, so
Through the dance.
so again, you know, we have 3 kids. They're all unfortunately don't have their own phones yet because we just I don't know.
Unfortunate or
Fortunately, I don't know which one. So that's what I want to ask you. Like, what are your thoughts on, and I guess in your practice with other parents and dealing with this a bunch, what do you see as good guardrails, frameworks, guidelines? How do parents make the decision of when should they get a phone, when should they not get a phone?
Yeah, that's
All those kinds of things, right? Because I think it seems pretty individual to a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, it is, but I don't know if that's what research would like support. I think research doesn't try to like single out every little family nuance or demographic, but it's generally like 12 years old is the kind of the standard.
Because I've heard the wait till 8 or wait until 8 or something like that as well.
Yeah. There's multiple elements to this. There is the generally speaking, what's a good idea, and that is you wouldn't give like a 3-year-old,
Right.
4-year-old, a 5-year-old, like here's your phone and access to like all the information in the world.
Yeah.
Clearly. So it's not, there's obviously some metrics that you'd be looking at, regardless of whether or not you agree with the overall research, you wouldn't do it to a 3-year-old. So you're like, well, when and why? And for Bree and I was the why. It wasn't really like, what's this going to do to their mind? Although that was a consideration, but why do we want them to have this? Is it beneficial to their life? given that it's obviously a matter of time until they do have a phone and they are in the media screen world, learning how to moderate it is a really big deal. And the younger we are, the harder time we have moderating and being self-aware. And so putting some of those restrictions in place because they don't have the self-discipline is a good parenting idea. I can't say to anyone in particular when they should give their kid a phone. It has a lot to do with like, well, what's the kid like?
Right.
What examples do they have of being able to hear the word no and not freak out? How addictive are their patterns? There are kids that go all in on things, and giving them something that just they get absolutely lost in before they have the self-discipline to adjust is not a good idea. Neither one of our kids are on the extreme side of addiction or the inability to cut something off. They absolutely struggle like most kids. Like, hey, you've been on that too long. Take a break. No, I haven't. But for both of our kids, like it only takes like maybe 2 rounds. Before I have their phone or our son's office computer or something. So I think it's harder because you got to have your finger on the pulse of who your kid is and what kind of behaviors are being exhibited. But when they don't demonstrate the ability to like limit themselves and or don't hear no very well, then restrictions are probably more important and more concrete and delayed phone or really clear use windows of time or like what is it, screen time, downtime schedule, all that stuff that you can set up from a phone. The more addictive the kid's personality is, the more important it is to have those restrictions, but also the more complicated and heated those dynamics become. And so and I would love to talk about that because the principle of them being on a screen is just one principle that you're actually talking about. The other one is, how are you communicating to your kid? What problem solving skill set are you actually modeling? And sometimes parents forget that latter one and they just think, you've been on too long, you've got to get off. And now it's like they've kind of unconsciously determined this is the number one parenting thing right now.
Right.
I'm going all in on this. And they miscalculate all the other parenting things that are happening, like your mood, your tone, your words, your inability to de-escalate them and talk about like what it means to resolve their energy. All those things are impacted and usually ignored. And the kids like in their head, maybe subconsciously, like, you're a jerk.
Right.
Like, why do you come in here and just unplug my game when I'm having a blast because you said I've gone over, but you have no respect for my enjoyment of my time. And most parents really don't respect the kid's time.
Right.
Because they think, you're a kid. This is a dumb game.
Right.
You've been on it too long and I'm tired of it and I'm going to take this shit out of your hands right now.
Yeah.
Right. And the kid is understandably disrespected.
Yeah, I mean, I always see that when I do it myself, where I'm like, hey, we said 30 minutes is up. They're like, yeah, but the game is almost over. I got, one more thing to pass or whatever. And
Yeah.
you're just like, boo.
Could you imagine you're watching a golf tournament,
And hate it.
hole 17, it's tied, and Libby's like, Dan, the screen time is up. Like your limits are here. And you're like, but it's up. It's just overtime. Right. And she's like, sorry, unplugs the TV. Obviously, we're different than our kids in terms of privilege,
Right.
and what we've earned. But to be a little bit more empathetic, like, be reasonable, right? Like, that's like probably like the most repeated parenting advice I give to like any client I work with is like, be reasonable. What's reasonable? You factor in what it's like to be them. And what are you trying to model? You're not trying to model like Nazi to the second life. Like, if you are, that's a weird thing to prioritize in a life that doesn't go like that, right?
Right.
But to be reasonable is, well, how much time do you have left? 5 minutes. Okay. I'm going to set my timer for 5 minutes and I'm going to come back in. Ideally, I would probably say first, when 5 is up, turn it off and then come find me so I know that you've taken care of it. If not, I'll come back in. And sometimes my son has gone past the 5 and he knows it. And I go in and say, hey, buddy, you said 5. We're now 8. Oh, yeah. I need you to turn it off. Okay. To me, that's a great sign that he is okay.
Right.
That doesn't mean I want him to be on a screen.
Yeah.
And I think it's good for him all by itself. He has fun. He does learn some things. It is social for him. But his ability to handle no is a huge measuring stick for me. And then my ability to navigate when he doesn't do what he says is really important in terms of how he handles those boundaries and what he's learning from me in terms of like respect and accountability and confrontation. And I think a lot of parents in that moment get stuck on the number,
right,
and not the relationship. And then the kid just starts to look at the parents like they're a prison warden, and they only care about enforcing these weird rules when no one's enforcing how much dad is on his phone,
yeah,
and how much dad watches TV.
Well, the one I always see is like, we'll be with, whether it's friends or family or whoever, with, and if all their kids have devices and they put the limits on them, right, from the iPhone app or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And the kid yells down, Mom, I need 30 more minutes, turn it on. And it's just this yelling match, when like maybe mom or dad's on their phone.
Yeah.
No, you can't have anymore. Yeah, get it, and it's just back and forth. So, yeah, I guess what do you think in those situations? Like, how do...
That's what, to me, it needs to be more intelligent than just a time.
Right.
Like, again, what do you want to prioritize? Do you want them to be outside? Then make them go outside.
Yeah.
Take them outside. Do you want family time with them? Everyone put their phones away and hang out and do a board game, watch a movie, whatever, take a walk. To just be against something is bad parenting. That doesn't mean that what you're fighting for isn't a good thing.
Right.
But in general, it's bad parenting because of the fail to calculate how it lands. What is this model? Does this really like teach all the things that you want to teach? Because it's usually lazy parenting and it's emotionally reactive versus reasonable and preventative or proactive in terms of what you're modeling, self-regulation, and the ability to hear no and not blow up. And that is something you have to practice with your kids early on. And that doesn't mean, like, I'm all for saying yes often, but when it's a no, it's a clear no, and you really stick to it. Versus like you're always a pushover. You're teaching them your no doesn't really mean a no. And sometimes like we don't have a great reason for a no, and then we reconsider. You're like, I don't know, why would I?
Yeah.
Why can't you go to so-and-so's house? Like, I don't have a good reason. If you don't have a good reason, I don't think you should say no.
Yeah.
You should, because there are plenty of things that you will say no to, you have a good reason. Like, and if you say a few and you mean it, you stick to it, and then you're gracious in other areas, it's going to make sense. It's reasonable. What's not reasonable is just to pick like random things to like stick a stake in the ground and die on the hill for, and to feel like you're going to like reclaim your authority, and you just look like a ridiculous power-hungry parent.
Right.
Versus, why want you to have fun? Going back to our last podcast, what I want for my kids, I want them to have fun in life. Like, you're here for a little bit of time. Why not have fun?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean do anything or everything just to have fun, but playing a game is fun for them, or talking to their friends. Our daughter's super social, so she's like FaceTiming friends or snapping friends, which she just, finally got Snapchat after a long holdout on our part. Yeah. And she's handled it pretty well.
No, that's good.
But I want them to have fun. I want them to feel connected. I want them to learn things, laugh.
Yeah.
Our son laughs at all his podcasts that we don't really understand.
Mm-hmm.
He's in there like laughing like crazy. I'm like, that's really good medicine for a human.
Right.
I don't want to prioritize screen time just by itself if it's not clear he's damaging himself. And I'm not saying I always get it right. And I'm definitely the more lenient parent when it comes to like my wife and I's like stance, because I think we need really clear reasons to say no. If not, if they're happy, they're laughing, they get their homework done, they do their chores, I'm like, I don't really care. I want them to sleep well. I want them to hear the word no and not freak out. And I want them to have fun. And I think those are seeds that are planted early on that lead to self-regulated kids. Mm-hmm. Not every kid, and there can be kids that are in that environment still don't like receive it very well. But in general, setting those kind of limits, but also being reasonable along the way and like really making sure they can hear the word no and not freak out allows them to be parented, and then you eventually hand more and more off as they get older to self-regulate. But another gigantic piece to this is what we model as parents.
Right.
And not surprisingly, it looks like a total double standard, or you're being a total hypocrite to enforce these things without clear reasons of why we can explain, and then we have no limits ourselves.
Right.
Do we have more privileges as adults and as parents? Absolutely. I'm not going to deny that. But again, what do you want to instill? That you get privileges and your kids don't because you work hard and you've done your time, and so now you're going to zone out on this thing that you know is toxic, and then help them believe that they should not do it and they should be okay with it, versus modeling what some sort of self-control looks like, or at least, if nothing else, acknowledge the hypocrisy.
Yeah. What would you break down the difference between the importance of modeling versus I've heard a lot of people will write contracts with their kids, right? Or have the kid, write a contract, and the parents will come and write a contract or edit the contract, and then they agree on both sign it, right? So that's sort of the guidelines and regulations for how they'll use their screens, right? I mean, I guess, do you like that idea? And do you feel like the modeling is more important than the kid sort of setting their guidelines and boundaries and being bought in with the parents together? Or how do you see those two play together?
I think both of those examples are just potential tools that would work for a family. Given the family dynamic and the personality types, a contract might work really well. For others, it just becomes like another sticking point in another area of conflict.
Right.
And so, not to say that because there's conflict, you don't do anything, but you don't really want to give kind of a weapon to people that have proven to be argumentative and debating. It's more, you want them to understand the bigger idea of you're going to have a lot of independence as you get older. No one's going to be looking at your screen time. You have to be able to say, this is too much for me. I need more of this. I need less of this.
Right.
As soon as you can, developing that kind of conversation and so help them think that way is really the goal. That would be my opinion. Obviously, at different ages, they don't have the self-awareness and self-regulation that you want them to have. And so you go heavy early and teach delayed gratification and self-regulation and self-awareness at age-appropriate levels. So more heavy-handed on the beginning years. And then as they start to get, you hand more of that off with some ideas of limitation. So my wife just recently had a conversation with our son, and he determined that he needs 2 days a week where he's not watching anything at all, like no screen privileges whatsoever.
Really? He came up with that on out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know the whole conversation of like what information was being referenced to get to that number, right, or what he thought the problem was. But he agreed to that or presented it. And ideally, that's the case, then we're just supporting his thing. That doesn't mean we're going to go soft on it just because he came up with it. I'd say this is the expectation. We're going to hold you to that until we find a better plan or something changes. But right now, this is really good. This is healthy. You get lots of privileges these other days of the week, and only a couple days a week do you take like time off from that. And I think there are families where that would be like ridiculously luxurious. Like they'd be like, you don't watch anything until the weekend, or
right.
And there are a lot of families that discipline works really well. There are a lot of families where it doesn't work well.
Right.
And they're not likely just going to like make it happen next week just because so-and-so does it. It's like, you got to know your family. You got to know your own personality type. You got to know what you're willing to follow. And you got to know your kids enough. And if you haven't done enough of the delayed gratification work, it's going to be really hard to introduce that when they're preteen or teen. They're going to be like, F you, like you don't get it.
Right.
Like no one lives like this, and we certainly never have. So I don't care whose friend you saw doing this and what show or what podcast or what Netflix series you watch. Like no one lives like that. And they might, but kids aren't going to believe it, the parent. But in that situation, you're you don't want to like try to redo everything. You're like, all right, well, let's just talk about what are reasonable limitations. What's the reasonable awareness? Like, I always ask, like, if I'm working with a teen and like, let's say they're doing drugs and mom and dad are worried and it's assumed they're like, just like in a horrible path, I'm like, well, I don't know. What's like too much for you? They're not used to that question from an adult, right? They're used to like, well, if you do this, this is what it does to your brain.
Right.
And you shouldn't do this till you're 25. They're so used to like all the parent speak and the adult speak. I usually ask like, well, do you like it? Why do you do it? Does it deliver on what you want it to? And what's too much look like for you?
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm encouraging them to think critically, and they're not needing to defend their activity. They're taking responsibility for actually what's good for them.
Right.
Right. Which is often like, we want your kids to think that way versus just a battle and a debate over the parent way.
Yeah.
Right. Like that, you can win that sometimes. And depending on who the kid is, it might be fine. But in general, it doesn't work very well. And most kids just dig their heels in and argue, especially in the teenage years when they're like, you can throw all the data in the world you want at me, but everyone's smoking weed and like no one's like got a fried brain. Like people like so-and-so still has a 4.0. This person just got full ride to this place and they smoke weed all the time. And the parent has like, they're in no man's land all of a sudden. Yeah. Well, it could be a bad road. And I know someone, they're on a good road and they lost it all because of drugs, I'm not saying I think kids should do all kinds of drugs but they're going to experiment. They're going to do stuff, and helping them developing their own guardrails and their own self-evaluation is vital for all the real adult kinds of things when independence is 100%.
I love that. So what was that question you asked again? It was, what does too much look like to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are your red flags? Like, how do you know you're using too much? Using whatever. A drug, a screen, like what's it start to feel like and function when you know you've gone overboard? And now, because I'd say everyone goes over on something, and this is just a indifferent, neutral kinds of self-awareness question. It's not an angle to tell them like, you should stop doing this. That's what they're used to.
Right.
And if you're going to go in and be like, well, video games are bad for you, screens are bad, social media is bad for you, we all know that. You shouldn't do it, but you're going to do it, some of it, and we're going to regulate the hell out of it. And we're going to like do this for your own good. Great sales pitch, right? No, everyone's like, screw that. Like, I'm going to find ways to get around this. I'm going to like use someone else's phone when you shut mine down, or versus what's good for you. What do you feel? What feels good? Like, do you want to stay up till 2 snapping?
Yeah.
I mean, if that's what you want to do, let's just make sure we're being really honest about the impact on your sleep and your mental health and your friendships. Like, is it necessary?
Right.
It's probably not good.
Yeah.
Common sense usually is good parenting and good living. Common sense be like, well, I probably shouldn't do anything till 2 when you're 14.
Right.
Should be sleeping already by a few hours.
Yeah.
But then to say, well, do you like how you feel when you wake up? Like, that's what I'd ask my daughter. And, we typically keep her phone in our bedroom, but not always. And sometimes I'm like, that's okay. It's a good idea, but it's not always realistic. And I do want her to suffer consequences, to learn herself of like, when she overdoes it, what happens?
It's kind of that when kids used to smoke cigarettes and the parents would give them a pack, give them a closet in the closet, and lock them in there. Of course. Let's see how you do.
Yeah.
Oh, you think it was 6 now?
I would ask her, like, well, is that what you want? Is that how you want to show up? Is that what it looks like? Does it feel good to take care of your body that way? Obviously, she could sense that I have an angle because she knows my value system. But to me, that screens is the ability to self-regulate is vital, because we're trying to get them set up to be independent at some point. And it's always this gradual release. And in the parenting, the difficult piece for the parent is you're always giving up control sooner than you'd like.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you're giving it up like a year or two always before you really wish you'd have to. Yeah. But that's the way it's always been. Like, that's how they learn. Be an involved parent to know in general, like, well, are they always on their phone? Is it toxic? Then talk to them about it.
Yeah. So what would you suggest to, I'm sure there's going to be people out there, parents out there, let's say they go ask their kid this question and say,
I think I'm fine.
What do you think is too much for you? Well, I actually liked it because I actually talked to a 20-year-old kid and I was asking him about how much he plays it. Well, he said he got up around 10 o'clock, would get on I can't remember what game, and play till literally like 10 in the morning until 2 in the morning. So just all, I mean, I was like, no, those are the wrong numbers. He goes, no, those are the right numbers. Like, I was like, what? That's not right.
Yeah.
So, maybe this kid wants to be, a little bit defiant, say, well, I think that is good for me. And that is, and you kind of know,
Everyone knows.
just now it's like that.
Like, that's not good.
That's not good.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's literally, I don't know. I can't even do the math on that. That's like 14 and 16 hours a day. It was just ridiculous,
Yeah.
Um,
I would ask that kid, again, their ability to sniff out a cornering trap is high. Like their ability to be like, I feel like Dan's coming at me and he's going to bust me here, right?
Mhm.
So that's why I think I would take a very different angle, kind of like the de-escalation, a technique of shock and awe
yeah.
to be the snake.
Right.
They're not used to it. And so they don't have a high security system on that door. And so you might be able to go in easier.
Mm-hmm.
To say, well, that's a lot of time. And I really hope for your benefit you love the games you're playing.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, are there other things in life that you don't get to, that you do like, that maybe are suffering because of the amount of time you spend?
Yeah.
Most likely, yes, but not necessarily a long list. It could be one thing, right? And I would want them, if nothing else, I want to plant the seed that it's not about them rebelling against some rule or some hour. It's about seeing like their own opportunity in life and being accurate. Like, is this how you want to spend it? Because eventually no one's going to give a shit how you spend your day.
Mm-hmm.
No one's asking you. It's just going to be your life, and it's going to produce a life that you either like or you don't like.
Right.
If you love your life and you want to play video games for 16 hours straight, then you probably won't stop.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that you like it, because that's going to be your reality. But I would assume if you didn't like it and other things started to suffer, you would make some adjustments.
Yeah. I would just assume parents would, obviously know, well, this is not a great path. Like, how are you going to make money? How are you going to support yourself? How are you going to get sunshine?
Yeah.
For like, just, all the things, right?
Yeah.
And we'll probably want to protect them, but
don't lead with those things, because
Right.
they sound as such like parent speak.
yeah.
It's true, 100% true. Like, hey, you're going to have a hard time socializing in the world if you don't know how to do this. And you might have a harder time getting a job, and all those things are true. But they're not strong selling points to a kid who's indoctrinated in that world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a coaxing out, it's an inviting them into a different way of thinking that works better than threats and super strong enforced limitations.
Right.
Yeah, like, hey, I think it's really good for us as humans to have a series or a diverse list of things that we do with our day and our time, in addition to things that we love. You love playing this game and playing games with your friends, which I love the fact that you have that community of people. You don't have to even love the thing that he's doing or she's doing in order to say, I like the fact that you have connection with people, even if it's digital. It's something that makes you laugh and like gets your adrenaline pumping a little bit. That's good. And I want you to also know other parts of being human and experience other parts of like being in the community and just branching a little bit. That's harder to argue with. It's easy to argue with, this is what video games do to your brain.
Right.
It's easy to argue about like timelines and find someone who has more or less.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to argue that it's a better human existence to have a little bit more diversity than 16 hours straight of video games.
Yeah.
And that's the angle I encourage with parents, is go into it feeling like it is your responsibility to help your son or daughter manage their electronics and their screen time, but not as a warden, but more as a co-collaborator of what it looks like to really like help them like learn for themselves. Like, how do I do this when no one's around? Like, when no one's looking, is this good for me? Like, you want them to be able to think that way versus like, well, what's the limit? Oh, Dad said 10 minutes, but he probably won't check until 20. So like, I'm definitely going to go 20. And then when he comes in, I'm going to push him even further, and then you're like, no, you're not, I'm going to not let you suffer. I'm going to enforce this for your own good. And it's absolutely a true and healthy intention. But to fail to calculate how you deliver on it is a pretty big parenting failure. So highlighting how you enforce, co-collaborate, encourage, model is just as important, if not more important, than the exposure to screen time itself.
Right.
All right. You want to keep the doorway open of conversation and relationship to talk about all of life, not just screens, but you can sometimes lose that privilege if you go in insulting, threatening, disrespecting. You unknowingly shut the door of the relationship, and then you lose your influence as they get older.
Mm-hmm.
Because as soon as they leave the house, like they get in the car and they leave, they're like, I can play anyone's video game I want, grab someone's phone, like mom and dad have no idea. And now it's like, screw you, mom and dad, versus what's good for me. My parents always ask me, like, am I doing what's good for myself? Is it really wholesome and good? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but they feel empowered to make those decisions, but not the kid that was just dictated and ruled over. They learn, like, when no one's looking, you do what you want.
So what would be your guidelines for starting that empowering? Because you were talking about age appropriate before.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a gradual, maybe it's a case by case with each kid, or like, what do you think there?
It depends on what you count. So let's say the younger kids, I'd say, like, I don't know if we want to say 5 to 10, and then there's a gigantic difference between a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. But starting really like high, big picture, I want you to be healthy. I want you to feel good in your mind and your body. If you're doing too much of something, sometimes if you're like me and most people, it can start to feel gross or bad or whatever. Let's just learn it's working on that together. So I would ask the kid, what does it start to feel like when you've had too much of something? And I would, again, age progressive with those questions, but help them, like, why, I don't know, I can't describe it, but I feel mad.
Right.
Oh, okay. So that feeling sometimes comes from too much focus on this thing. I don't want you to feel that way. Let's work at, like, benchmarking that, or you would say that to your kid, but let's start to be aware of that. And maybe let's do check-ins. So, like, let's say, what if we did every half hour, we are able to, like, pause and do a quick check-in, like, is there anger in your body?
Right.
You're like, actually there is. Like, and let's talk about what are 3 things we could do if you start to have anger in your body.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the less intelligent parenting is just say, you're done, and it's cutting off because you're angry. Although a parent has a right to do that, and the intention behind it is for the kid, it's poor delivery and doesn't really invoke as much learning as you could. But to say, what's it feel like in your body? And then what are 3 things that you think help you to reset? Now, if they said, I don't know, nothing helps, we might have to introduce some ideas, and we might have to say, hey, it's a half hour quick body check, but based on your fist clenching and your locked jaw and the foam coming out of your mouth, do you need a break? Yeah. No, I don't. Everything's fine. All right, here's the deal. We're gonna take a quick pause. We're just gonna go outside. We're gonna do this thing, hopefully reset, and then if you can come back in and it's still like looks like you can play, like, we'll do that.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be always like black and white, like, you're angry, well, you're done.
Right.
The whole point is then to learn to de-escalate and self-regulate with limitations. Teaching that is more important than them just being done. But if you don't cut them off, you're teaching them your words mean nothing, and there is no such thing as self-regulation. So obviously the follow-through is important, but not at the cost of relationship and energy and introspection for learning from their part.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that goes for more than just screens. It's kind of everything.
Everything.
I mean, just all types of
food, anything good or bad can become too much, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to call out one of my boys, but just like I was telling a story the other day, like, we're hitting golf balls, and he started getting really frustrated because he's like, oh, like, these numbers aren't the most ideal numbers, or I should be doing. I was like, hey, thought we were just having fun, it's like, no, great. No, we're not. Yeah. It's like, okay. So I mean, it can go any direction, I think.
If we take things, anything is like capable of being taken too seriously.
Yeah.
and evidenced by what it starts to manifest in our body. And if we're not aware of that for ourselves, we're having a harder time bringing that up with our children. So again, always coming back to, am I being healthy? Am I mindful and aware and able to calculate what's working, what's not working? If I can't, one, it's going to look hypocritical, or two, I might not even know what to bring up with my kid.
Yeah.
But if I'm doing that and then I notice, oh, I'm feeling, and then, oh, I think they're feeling, like, hey, I notice if I'm at the range and it's not going well and I can't fix it, I shouldn't keep grinding because it doesn't usually go very well.
Right.
And I work best when I like put my clubs away, maybe leave or take a walk and shift brain thought, brain pattern, movement, and come back to it, because I want this to be a fun thing in my life. If it's not fun, like something's wrong, like I'm doing something wrong. And I want that same thing for you, whether it's video games, hitting golf balls, even studying a language or an instrument. Like everyone knows, to push ourselves is constantly engaging a challenging limit of our expertise. And that creates tension and frustration.
Right.
That's where growth usually occurs, but it can be in a really unhealthy, toxic way. We want to model like, hey, it's good to push yourselves beyond your skill set. You should expect failure. That's the whole idea. It's like calculated failure over and over and over again. And it's understandable that you don't like limits on things you love. I don't either.
Yeah.
But it's because there are other things that are better for you than just fully indulging in your thing nonstop. It's not that I don't want you to have fun. I would tell that to my kids, and I tell that to parents all the time. Be reasonable. Why? Of course you want them to have fun. Don't be an idiot and act like you don't know what it's like for them to be wrapped up in something they love. Like, we have those things. Mm-hmm. And if you're in the middle of a golf tournament and your wife comes and unplugs the TV because she says you've reached your screen time for the day, you're going to lose your mind. You're like, this is absolutely absurd. Is this domestic violence? Yeah. This is not tolerable.
They should play the ID in her head. Probably happen next Masters Sunday.
Yeah.
With a written contract.
Yeah, but these were your hours of golf.
You're going to beat me up.
Or we,
Towards you.
Yeah, I want to go back to the question you asked, like, well, how does a parent enter into this space? It depends on like how old your kid is and how patterned these habits really are. If they're not set in stone, you can cover a lot of ground and put some really fun plans in place. If things are definitely in concrete and they've been there for a while, you have to go a lot lighter and softer in your approach, and give yourself like maybe a few weeks, maybe a few months to like kind of steer this gigantic cruise ship that you want to make a turn in. You're like, well, you're not going to make it quickly.
Right.
This is going to be like maybe some weeks and months to say, hey, maybe I haven't handled it very well as a parent, and like respectfully and wisely setting limitations for all of our well-being. And I've apologizing to you for that, even though you don't probably feel the negative of it. You're probably like grateful for it. But I want to do a better job of helping you learn what limits look like for you. And you can say that to probably like any kid, I don't know, like 10 and up, and with more introspection follow-up depending on the older they are. So the 10-year-old, I'd still say like, I want you to be healthy and good. And I know sometimes that means stopping doing what you're liking. Like if you love chocolate and it makes you smile when you eat it, obviously eating chocolate for 12 hours is like not going to be good. Like you'll get sick. And in some ways, playing this game for this amount of hours is like getting sick. Like it's just not healthy. I don't want you to stop eating chocolate. It's delicious. I want you to have fun playing your game. But I also care about your overall mind, your body, your relationships. And so let's just, in the weeks ahead, start to like pay more attention to what it feels like. And both of us work at like setting some limitations and some alternative options when you reach those limitations. And if a parent follows through on that and they're reasonable and respectful, there's a really good chance the kid will comply. I don't know if they'll be excited about it or look forward to it, right? But they'll be like, wow, it's reasonable. But the unreasonable expectations don't go very well. And it just sets up a control battle that you eventually lose. Yeah, when they're young, you can pull it off, but eventually they're going to be like, I'm out of here. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
You can't call the cops. You can't like tell me I can't use my friend's phone to like snap someone.
And then to dumb it down even more, it sounds like what I got out of that was really entering with more questions than stats, or it's always questioning. It's just like ask a question and let them come up with the answer, right?
Yeah.
I think that's huge.
It's certainly okay to reference, in theory, reference stats, but I mean, how boring,
Right.
and detached to stats feel to like a 14-year-old. Like, well, here's the latest statistics on usage at your age, and this is what doctors say.
Right.
Like, well, doctors also say, Dad, like you shouldn't like drink more than you should drinks during a week.
Yeah.
Like, well, you're not here to tell me how to live. Yeah, you're like, you're right. I do a number of things that experts say I've gone over my limit.
Yeah.
And then own it because it's reasonable, right? And then say, I know, but I want to be better. Maybe I need to revisit that. Maybe I need to have some goals, right? Maybe do we do this tandem thing where you're working on this and I work on my thing? It feels fair, and it's incentivizing and encouraging them to like set limits and make it a fun thing versus just the authoritative parent coming in and putting those limitations on.
Right.
But yes, ask questions. Try not to be super obvious that you're coming in to limit. You're coming in to learn, help them learn.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, limits are a good idea for all of us. Again, go back to chocolate. Like a few pieces of chocolate a day is not going to be a problem.
Right.
But, 4 or 5 chocolate bars a day is going to be a problem. And even like greens, like, well, you're not going to solely eat greens all day and that's it. Just salads all the day. Like your system will be unbelievably empty.
Yeah.
Right. And you're like, you got to have a little this. So just acknowledging that and comparing it to your own life too. It's not just like a kid and screen time. It's humanity and knowing what's wise. That's not a great selling point to most kids. So you don't say it that way, but it's, I want you to be healthy and feel good. I've known, and you can attest to this. When you've done too much, you don't feel good.
Right.
I just want to like know what those limits are and help you have a plan where you don't end up feeling that way.
Yeah.
That's inviting them into the solution and not making the problem something they have to fight over as much.
Yeah.
Let's say you do have to unplug the TV because they just won't turn it off. Just be nice and do it. They might be just an absolute little shit. And you might be like, hey, I've given you like 3 opportunities to turn this off, but you're not listening. You've gone way over. I'm going to unplug it. And I just need you to know that. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I'm unplugging it in 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's reasonable.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard for the kid to get mean. That doesn't mean they can't and won't, but it's harder for them to get mean and treat you disrespectfully when you're respectful. So how you do the limitations is oftentimes more important than the mechanics of what limitations you choose. But yes, ask questions, be nice, be reasonable. Don't be a hypocrite. Be mindful of what you're modeling because they're always absorbing it, right? And then ask good questions that you don't have to have answers to. Like that, you're not. No one's. We're the pretty good parent because we don't need to be experts. Like I don't know everything. I don't need to know everything in order to like be healthy and wise. Like I don't know that yet. Let's talk about that. Maybe there's a better outcome that we can come up with.
Yeah.
And then you do that with your kid, and it's like, I'm not an expert in everything or in very many things. Let's figure it out together. Do you like how you feel when you do that till 2 a.m.? Yeah, well, no. Yeah, I wouldn't either. Let's talk about other ways to reset that or set limitations. So,
well, those 2 things that stick out to me is that modeling and asking questions, and even going back to the de-escalation, stuff that we talked about, and a couple times, like what has happened in my family with my kids. I've thought about that. What am I modeling?
Yeah.
When I come in to have this conversation, am I coming in hot, screaming and yelling, right? And then it's like that's. And so I think it's just massive for me, like understanding, just take a breath, understand what are you modeling, what are you looking like, ask your own question, like why, what do you want for yourself, and then what do you want for your kid, right? In those situations. Yeah. And then just asking those questions and then I've been blown away by some of the answers my 7-year-old comes up with, right? And then I just realized I probably never asked her questions before. I just told her shit and just be like, do this, do that. Because I draw some good stats too.
A graph.
I'm a big try.
Well, I'm going to talk about this probably every time. because it's so important. But your energy is your greatest tool as a parent. It's not going to be your words. It's not going to be all the lectures. It's going to be your energy. Was it loving? Was it safe? Was it reassuring? And was it present? If it's not, you're not getting the most out of whatever you're doing.
And they see right through that.
They feel it. They don't even like.
And especially with the screen, when you're on a screen trying to tell them something.
Yeah.
How many times do you see that? Someone be like giving them a lecture while they're on the screen.
Yeah. You shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
But to sit there and like put your arm around them, right? And have a warm demeanor. Like, hey, this is a privileged moment. You're teaching your kids limits right now. This is a really cool thing. Don't go in pissed off.
Yeah.
We do sometimes. That's why we're just pretty good and we're not amazing. But we should know better. Like our energy is like 90% of what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to turn off the TV. But if my energy is respectful and calm, they're going to be more respectful and calm. Maybe not 100%, maybe not even do it really well, but it won't be as bad if I go in pissed off, disrespect them, and then expect them to handle that well.
Right.
It's like why would you expect them to handle that well? You wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
You're offended all the time when your boss or a friend treats you disrespectfully and you're, aghast by it.
Right.
Why? So is your kid. So just be nice and still do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Discipline doesn't have to mean you're a jerk. It's a learning. It's all about learning. It's not making them feel bad. That's not the learning lesson. It's to calculate for themselves, is this good for me or is this not good for me? And the younger they are, the harder that is to calculate. And the older they are, the easier. But parents mess it up when they make it about like punishment and energy and anger reaction. It's like you're interfering with their learning opportunity. Don't make it about wrong. Make it about what's wise. My son watches more stuff than I could ever imagine, like me liking. But he laughs a lot. He's dancing around. He's like I can hear him in there. He's got his like headphones on, or he's playing something, or he's got his VR set on. He's got like everything. And he'll be like laughing and dancing. And then he comes out. It's like, Dad, guess what? And I wish it were like something I liked more, but I'm like, what? The kid's happy? He laughs. Like, that's good medicine, man.
Yeah.
Would it be better for him to be on a hike? Oh, probably. But then take him for I should be modeling and encouraging the things I want for him versus just saying no to the things he likes and then expect him to be happy, right? So a lot of that ownership comes back on me. Like, what are you initiating? What are you encouraging? And then don't discourage things that don't have clear signs of negativity. Yeah. Well, he's on his screen. Yeah, he is. But God, he's like laughing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I value having a good time in life.
Yeah.
Not everyone values that, which is hard to imagine. But some people don't really like prioritize having a good time in life. I want them to have a good time.
Stabs over a good time.
Go live that life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, Josh. I love it. I might be moving. We have modeling, asking questions, but also energy up to that top of that list too.
Love it.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
You be conscious of your energy. You have it all the time. And if it's not dialed, you're not getting the most out of any of your situations.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Kids or partner or work or whatever.
Yeah. Well, awesome, man. I think we're out of time. Appreciate it as always.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Likewise, buddy.
Yeah.
Let's go be pretty good parents.
Pretty good parents.
Yeah. Just like, what is that, a B+?
Yeah.
A minus?
I'll take a B+ all day long.
Yeah.
Pretty good. All right. Well, thanks, y'all. Go be pretty good parents, and we'll see you next time.
Absolutely.
All right.
Adios.
Adios.